from Section 204. Heavy Hockey Podcast with Michael and guests. Heavy hockey isn't dead. It's just getting started.
Good afternoon. It's Michael here from the Heavy Hockey Podcast. I've got as my guest today, Eric Macramalla. Did I get that right? Or is it Macramalla?
You did. You pronounced it like my mom does. A little bit off, but it's pretty much correct.
Perfect. All right. And Eric is a regular contributor to all sorts of media platforms, but has a regular show on TSN Radio out of Ottawa, which can be heard in Edmonton as well on the weekends. Welcome, Eric, and thanks for taking some time with me.
Mike, it's a pleasure. Any friend of TSN 1260 is a friend of mine. Unless you're an enemy, then you're not my friend.
Awesome.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, you qualify as probably one of the only folks that I've had on the show so far that has some knowledge and some background in the legal side of sport. And so I've got about 1 million questions, and we'll just get through as many as we can and go from there. But so much happening in the world. This is primarily a hockey podcast, but we'll talk sport in general. One of the things that, of course, is current and being talked about today, and so far, Daly has come out to say the NHL will not follow suit. But earlier today, of course, the Milwaukee Bucks, if I'm not mistaken, have decided to boycott the NBA playoffs. And so all games were postponed today because of what's happening in Kenosha. What's your feeling on this in terms of the NHL? Like, is there a gut feeling that you get when you see something like this that the NHL will? I mean, we seem to be, as far as the NHL seems to be the follower in this regard. Is that a safe statement?
Yeah, I think you're looking at two very different situations when you compare the NBA to the NHL, Mike. With the NBA, the player population is about 75% African American, and in total about 80% minorities. And so when you see Jacob Blake shot 7 times in the back, a defenseless Jacob Blake with his kids 3, 5, and 8 years old in the car, and it's effectively attempted murder on a defenseless man, that is going to resonate and connect differently with NBA players than it will with NHL players. NBA players are so intimately tied to this. There's a real connective tissue here to the point where they've boycotted the games. And there's an argument the NBA season may be on the brink and players may leave the bubble. Personally, I don't agree they should leave the bubble because the NBA provides them with such a substantial platform insofar as messaging goes. And in these types of circumstances, the NBA players have a great opportunity to empower the powerless and to stay on message and to serve the movement, serve the revolution, serve the reckoning. And the last thing you want to do is vacate a platform like the NBA platform, which has 1 billion eyeballs on it. Vacate that platform and forfeit that opportunity to stay on message. I get the players are crestfallen, demoralized, and I get the players feel like they're playing basketball at a funeral. And all that stuff kind of collides to result in players boycotting games and threatening to leave the bubble. I don't think it's going to happen. In contrast, the NHL, you don't have 75% of players are not black. There's a small percentage of NHL players that are African American or that are black, and so I think you're looking at two very different situations. I think it's a situation where NHL players perhaps are once again going to engage in on-ice activism. That is some type of demonstration that they're on board with NBA players and on board with African Americans generally who are tired of being killed for no apparent reason. But the NHL, I think, is a different type of outfit with different types of employees. And so you're going to see a different type of reaction, Mike, here than you would with the NBA. Really, it's the NFL. Would the NFL be more aligned with the NBA's reaction than the NHL?
Yeah, and that's a good point. And so one of your areas of expertise, obviously, is sports law. What I'm kind of curious about is, as we take this sort of a little bit further, I mean, I think for you and I, and maybe not for you because you're in media, but for a lot of listeners out there, we're bound by codes of conduct that limit, how we express our political views on, quote unquote company time or utilizing company resources. These, in essence, I mean, the players of any league are employees of these organizations. And, if the Bucks or any team boycotts a game like that, there's some, got to be some lost revenue that the owners feel. Does this have any ramifications for player contracts or in future negotiations around collective bargaining, anything like that? Is there anything in the contracts today that really sort of limits them from doing this, but they're doing it anyway? I mean, I think it would be a horrible thing for the NBA to say, we're going to go after you for boycotting a game for this particular purpose, but do you see anything like that coming down in the next collective bargaining for either NBA, NHL, otherwise, where they're really limiting them from being able to speak out on, as I say, company time?
Well, the NBA would never seek to muzzle their players/employees. That's why Don Sterling, the former owner of the Clippers, was banned for life by Adam Silver's. Adam Silver's first act of business or duty of business was to ban Sterling for life for the racist comments that he made. The only recourse the league would have is, look, if you guys leave the bubble, then you don't get paid anymore. If you guys boycott, then if you walk away from the league, you're not going to get paid. Perhaps they wouldn't toll the contract, so players might be 1 year further away from free agency as if this year never happened, but that seems highly unlikely because they played most of it, and the league wouldn't do that. Adam Silver, the commissioner of the NBA, does understand that the NBA is a player-driven league. It's a celebrity-driven league, and the players run the show unlike any other sport. Part of it is just the way that the sport is constructed. Very few players on the floor, and you've got so many superstars. Insofar as the NHL goes, it just wouldn't be good optics if the league, any league, including the NHL, turned around and punished players for speaking their minds on issues related to civil rights. It wouldn't be good optics if the league turned around and punished players for engaging in activism on this matter. It's so top of mind. It is such an important issue, looking to unravel 400 years of despicable, nefarious behavior. And it's going to take a group effort. And the leagues get that. And you also don't want to alienate your players and your fan base. So this is a whole new thing. But the leagues, the NHL and Gary Bettman and Bill Daley, they understand that you need to tread carefully here and let players express themselves. This is bigger than any single game.
That's right. Well said. I kind of think that I always kind of, realize though that at the heart of it, I mean, there's a number of owners and they are worried about their bottom lines, and something like this could certainly, affect exactly, the P&L of a team, going forward. But on the flip side, right? Obviously, the optics could have a bigger effect. I did, it is kind of interesting because you also wrote an article in Forbes along with another fellow whose name escapes me right now around the
Max.
Washington Redskins. Yeah, Max. That's right.
Yeah.
And it was about the Redskins name. Now, most of my listeners are from the Edmonton region, mostly Oilers fans. Of course, we've got the now named Edmonton Football Club. Is this? Have we ever seen, or in your knowledge, have we ever seen a time like this in sport? I mean, is this? This is just changing the way sport is being viewed. It was in my mind anyway, and tell me what your thoughts are. I'd love to know. I mean, in my mind, we had sport as sport. People went and watched it. And now it has turned into, this is really sort of the transformation into that entertainment where, people are looking at this to kind of give them their feelings of, what type of, real sort of issues should we be looking at today? That was traditionally like film and media. That was never sport. I mean, is this a whole new world for us now?
Look, there's no doubt that when Derek Chauvin murdered George Floyd, that triggered a reckoning, a revolution, a seismic racial quake. And it so profoundly shifted public sensibilities. And I remember saying a couple of days later online on Twitter that the Redskins' name is next because it was just an undeniable force. But I don't know if this level of activism, if athlete activism is anything new. Arthur Ashe engaged in it. Tommy Smith and Juan Carlos' 68 Olympics with the Black Power salute. Jim Brown created the Economic Union. Althea Gibson, Billie Jean King, Jackie Robinson, Muhammad Ali, Jesse Owens, Bill Russell, Michael Sam, Dwayne Wade, Bill Walton. I mean, there was a long history, LeBron James, a long history of players engaging in activism going back to the turn of the century, the turn of the previous century, in fact. And so it's just now it's far more present, and there are far more athletes that are engaged on the same issue, and for good reason. Athletes have always been activists. The difference here is that there are a lot more athletes focused on a single issue.
Yeah, excellent. I figured you might have a list of players and issues that have come up in the past.
I got lots of lists in my head, Mike. I got way too many lists in my head. I don't understand. I mean, I do all this sports media stuff just for fun, and I don't understand why I take it so seriously. I guess maybe I'm a sports fan. Who cares? But it really annoys me that I have to care this much. It really bugs the hell out of me.
You know what? I'm 100% on board with you, and just troubled by some of the things that are happening today for sure. Let's switch lanes, because you know what? That's going to get it won't get enough publicity, but it will get its publicity for sure. I want to ask you some questions about the NHL and specifically around sports law. That is some questions I've kind of always had. One of the things that I'm kind of curious about, right, is when we look at the NHL, obviously we're going through an area of what some people are saying is labor peace. Maybe it's a little bit longer labor peace than we've had in a long time. I've always been curious about the revenue sharing aspect and I know that when they sit there and they do all of the negotiations, that this is a big part that comes up there. How does the NHLPA keep tabs on all those multiple entities that make up, hockey-related revenue? Like, how important? Like, what kind of counsel would the NHLPA have to really? I mean, dig deep. I mean, this to me, like these owners have been most of their life. If anybody's done anything in the corporate world today, they understand that one company could have 100 different subsidiaries, and to me, hockey-related revenue and a share of hockey-related revenue is a made-up number. Like, I don't know how they get to that. Like, what? Are they fundamentally changing the way that they're creating an NHL team in a legal corporate aspect so that they have specific revenues? Would it be like church?
Well, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's I mean, I understand what you're saying is that there are ways to conceal revenue. There are ways to not be entirely forthright. Hockey-related revenue on the CBA has a very specific definition. And it's not in anyone's best interest for the teams to lie about that stuff. And you can also kind of figure it out by getting a forensics financial expert to come in if ever you have any doubts. The issue is, under the new CBA and the old one, are there enough things that are included in hockey-related revenue? So under the old CBA, expansion fees were not included under hockey-related revenue. So you expand in Vegas and Seattle, players don't get a cut. Some players thought, well, they should get a cut because they're part of the reason why the league can expand as they have. So in the new CBA, that's not there. They don't get expansion fees, but I think the league's probably done expanding because Gary Bettman has achieved his dream. That is 32 teams. That's what he's wanted all along, so he has it. But you have to look at whether hockey-related revenue is still broad enough to encompass revenue that players feel they're entitled to. In all likelihood, speaking to a couple of agents who were closely sort of tied to the CBA negotiations, there was still some disappointment that didn't cast a wide enough net. So the more hockey-related revenue, the more the players get. And you have to look at things like gambling down the line, and there'll be a lot of revenue generated from that. And what's the player's cut going to be on that? And a lot of that's going to turn on the contractual language. And was it drafted in such a way to maximize the player's return? So it's definitely, you're right, it is a complicated issue. It is a nuanced issue. But ultimately, I think the issue now in the new CBA is, do the players, have they included enough of HRR? And some would say they haven't.
Yeah. Okay. And I mean, they, without the players, you don't have the league, right? So I obviously, I mean, we.
But then on the flip side, without a league, you don't have players. The players are employees.
Yeah.
You can replace the players, but you can't necessarily replace the league. Now, look, some would say in 50 years, a player or some players will start their own league. Okay, that they'll figure this out. But right now, the players get paid what they paid because the league has negotiated these media rights deals and have this complicated, nuanced infrastructure in place. So I don't know if you can just sort of say, look, it's just without the players, you don't have a league. Without the players need the league more than the league needs the players, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's a fair statement. One of the things I've always been curious about as we talk about revenues, a player, let's say, let's take an Oiler, Ethan Bear. He sells. You go to an Oilers shop and you buy an Ethan Bear jersey. Does the player see that revenue specifically because it's an Ethan Bear jersey, or is that part of a collective NHL revenue stream?
So, sorry, are you asking if that jersey is sold, who gets the money for it?
Or a cut of the money. Yeah.
So that revenue is domestic. So in the NFL is a centralized revenue model. That revenue shares 40% across the league, and the incumbent team keeps the 60%. In the NHL, the team that sells the jersey keeps all the revenue.
And so it wouldn't matter if it's, if McDavid sold, 100,000 jerseys and Ethan Bear sold 30 or 30,000, that would all be in one pool.
Yeah, I mean, if Connor McDavid jerseys are sold in Ottawa, because I bought one for my son, then Ottawa keeps that revenue, right?
Yeah. Okay, that's excellent. Some of those things I've always been, very curious about. Such that, like, let's say Connor McDavid retires, 10 years from now. Is there any royalties to, when the Oilers sell a Connor McDavid jersey? I mean, you see, obviously, Wayne Gretzky jerseys go.
Zero.
Okay.
No, there are no royalties on that. No.
No, it's. To me, that's kind of interesting, right? I mean, the Oilers obviously then probably don't pay royalties to Wayne Gretzky on Wayne Gretzky Oilers jerseys as they go out the door, which they still do and derive some revenue from, I assume, currently. Okay. On another note, and one of the kind of the questions that I had is, you've got all of this experience in sport law. What's an area of the NHL today? And one of the questions that came in on Twitter was, about which is obviously always a big question about, fighting and assaults in hockey, that sort of thing. But what's an area where you might be surprised today that you haven't seen any legal challenges or proceedings on so far in the sport?
Oh, geez.
It's a bit of a curveball question, so.
No, I guess. I mean, oftentimes stuff happens on the ice, and people believe that they're insulated from liability because it happens on the ice. If you clock someone in a parking lot, you get arrested, charged with assault. If you do it on the hockey rink, you get a high five and patted on the back. There have been instances where players have engaged in some pretty questionable behavior on the ice, insofar as contact that can't be characterized as incidental. Players consent to incidental contact on the ice, but not to Bertuzzi on Moore type of situations. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say I'm surprised you're not seeing more lawsuits. I'm surprised that people maybe think that you get a pass because it happens on a hockey rink. and that there isn't potential recourse available at the NHL level or in rec leagues, all the way down.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've heard the odd assault charge from a rec league and something like that, but yeah, you're right. I mean, you don't see it very often. I would expect at some point. I mean, it probably typically happens more often if there's some type of major injury that's comes about from it, or some type of serious damages that happens. Are there any specific sort of legal judgments in the history of the league that you feel have had a real profound effect on the way the league operates or even plays?
Well, I think concussion litigation with the NFL has impacted the NHL. You saw that they have new policies in place with respect to managing concussions and also dealing with headshots. So there was a real move there, a real change, and a slight change in culture as well. So I think concussion litigation is really at the top of the list as to what has really altered the league's policies. Legal will really drive policy, and this is one instance where that is where that is the case.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think we've seen some of that carry over. Obviously, there was that recent case. I guess last year was settled, right, with the players in the NHL. Was it?
It was settled just with that group of athletes. So
yeah,
there's nothing precluding athletes from suing again.
Oh,
just
okay.
That limited. That's the misconception. So there's nothing precluding athletes from retaining lawyers and suing over that kind of stuff.
Interesting. Okay. And then are there any areas that you would say today from a legal perspective that the NHL leads in today that, some of the other leagues could learn about, or maybe areas where they're even behind the other leagues on the flip side to that?
Well, I think they lead on having the best game. It's the most fun game to watch, isn't it? I mean, baseball has an action problem, and I love the NFL, and I love Major League Baseball. I love the NBA, but nothing beats hockey. So I think they lead on the product on the ice. I don't understand why it's not more popular. Well, I do understand, but it should be a lot more popular than it is. And I think it's easy to take shots at Goliath and at the commissioner, but I like what he's done. I think he's done a relatively good job keeping teams where they should be. And sometimes it's easy to cast stones, but for me, I have an immense amount of respect for Gary Bettman and for some of the things that he's done.
Yeah, and I think it's funny because he, as he steps out on the ice, obviously it's a chorus of boos everywhere he goes, and he seems to now soak it up and expect it. And from a standpoint of like, I'm not sure that I could handle that going out there, but he's taken the league through a number of different labor disputes and still managed to grow it and grow hockey revenues and keep it relevant in a time where, as you say, I mean, there are reasons why it's not watched, and a lot of it has to do with, just from the ground floor and the foundational level, the amount of players that play and understand the game and in, areas where they don't have ice as a regular occurrence. And I think, one of the cities that, the NHL could take and should use as a case study is Dallas, right? I mean, they have done just a fantastic job in the community of acquiring all of the ice that is there and building the game from a foundational level. It's just phenomenal what they do, so you can go to Dallas, which is far too hot on a hot summer day to be thinking about hockey, and still walk into the local sports store and see hockey merchandise and see other than Dallas Stars merchandise there, which tells me that there are fans of the game that are not just Dallas Stars fans, but you walk into any rink there, and if I'm not mistaken, they own, along with Dr. Pepper, every rink in the Dallas area. So, big deal for them to build that foundationally.
Yeah, no, they've done a nice job there. The owner of the team escapes me at the moment, Canadian Tom Ghilardi,
Yeah.
one of the Dallas Stars, and I've interviewed him on my show. He's done a really good job with hockey in Dallas. So it's sort of something to be proud of for sure.
Now, if you look at the team and just kind of sort of wind this down, but if you not the team in general, but the NHL in general, and you think of it from your perspective, from this sports law perspective, and you kind of see where it's going, and if I'm not mistaken, you teach some classes on sports law as well. What do you see as kind of the ongoing trends in terms of the NHL as we go through these? We've now extended this collective bargaining agreement. What's kind of the next big hurdle for the NHL moving forward, so that we can, if we're at 32 teams, we're going to be, the league is going to be successful going forward. Anything that you kind of see?
Yeah, it's a good question. I guess I would look to the new CBA and maybe what no one's really talked about, because I don't know to the extent that people were reporting on the new CBA, but they weren't analyzing or being critical of what was agreed on. And I think one issue is the NHL players are getting younger. I think we all know that. And so I would like to see arbitration rights materialize a year earlier for players because the league is getting younger. And I think you want to have that. I think escrow is a bit high, 20% this coming year, and I understand that. I think it's going to drop over the next few years. But I mean, all leagues, the NBA has escrow as well, but it strikes me as a relatively high number. So escrow is going to be an issue. I think ultimately the bottom line is always the bottom line, and issues of money and compensation will always be central for players. And issues of arbitration rights and issues of escrow, I think, are key. And insofar as blowing up the salary cap, that would take the players to sit out an entire year. I'm not a big fan of the salary cap. I don't think you need it. And I think let teams spend what they want to spend. But I think players maybe aren't a fan of the salary cap, but at the same time, they recognize that their finite earning potential, if they sit a year, then they're really losing out. So that's unlikely to change.
Yeah. Well, excellent. I think that I couldn't agree more in terms of the arbitration rights. I don't know enough about the salary cap, really to. I mean, when I think about what the alternatives are. I really don't think the luxury tax worked in Major League Ball. Obviously, where you had some fairly wealthy teams that could just spend through it. Do you have an alternative in terms of what you would do, or you just scrap it altogether?
The NBA has got a luxury tax, and I think it works fine. I'm not a big fan of stifling players' salaries. Getting together and placing a ceiling on what they can earn.
Yeah. And
I'm all for paying players whatever teams and employers want to pay them. And if they want to pay them a lot, then so be it. So I'm just not a big fan of it. I understand its utility. I understand why it's in place. And, as an Expos fan, you would think that I would want a salary cap in place. But I'm fine with a luxury cap. It takes too long for teams to rebuild. It takes too long for teams to really change the course. And if you free up the purse strings for some teams, then they can acquire the players that they want to acquire.
Yeah. I think, Edmonton being the hockey crazed city that it is, that might be that would be good news for for Oilers fans, assuming
you guys can get yourself a goalie.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, you know what? Appreciate your time here. Last question. Do you have a pick for Stanley Cup this year?
Tampa's defensive core is just so freaking impressive, isn't it? I mean, you win you win these titles with defense. And my goodness, that decor with the Lightning is so good, and they've got a pretty good goalie as well. So I'm gonna go with who I think is best on D and in net, and I'm gonna go with Tampa. How about you?
All right. Well, I actually I picked Boston in my bracket, and watching them, I mean, they are relentless. Like, just I watched that game last night, and I know Tampa Bay came out victorious, but I tell you, when they turn it on, they're like playing keep away, right? And they're just ridiculous. And I, you know what, I would love to hate Boston, right? I mean, Marchand, obviously, he's a polarizing figure, but they're just that team that I would love to hate. But I watched them play, and you can't deny the fact that when they get their legs going, they play like other teams that play like that are Columbus and Vegas, and those kind of teams that when they just get their legs going, they seem to, not be, they seem to get every puck and every corner battle, but we'll see. I mean, obviously to me, that's the series right there. Whoever comes out of that is my odds-on favorite, if they don't beat each other up. Yeah, which is always a possibility. Sometimes you can get a little bit too excited. All right, well, you know what? I appreciate your time, Eric. I will tune in on the weekends on TSN 1260 and continue to read some of your articles. Love what you have to say. Love the approach that you've taken to it, and I couldn't. I've actually known about you for some time, but I realized that I wasn't following you on Twitter until recently. So you can find Eric on Twitter at Eric on Sports Law. And thanks again for being here. Appreciate you spending some time.
Yeah, or you can find me outside of Park Mazda stalking Mitch. So those are one of the two places: Twitter or outside of Park Mazda. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, Mike, and I'm happy we had a chance to connect.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
You're welcome.
Oilers Live.